Welcome to QueerTWENTY, the cohort of 2022. QueerTWENTY is egomonk's annual flagship program where we celebrate exceptional queer Indians who are excelling in different fields such as arts, science, commerce, etc. Today, we have a multi-talented individual with us, Hina Siddiqui. Hina identifies as a neurodivergent queer, and professionally, Hina is basically a bundle of everything creative and transformative. She is a transmedia storyteller who is dabbling in narrative design. She writes comics, she makes games, runs a podcast called Queer Lives, and has one of the coolest websites I have come across, Rainbows and Dragons. So now, without further ado, let's welcome Hina. Hina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for being here. This is very exciting.
So, Hina, you identify as a neurodivergent queer. These are two identities that are non-normative. Could you share where you are on your journey of acceptance of these identities?
My identification and with the labels per se came very late in life. Like literally both identities is something I realized about myself in my 30s. Right. Yeah. So it's not something that I was aware. So my life, I think a large part of it has been characterized by just this sense of alienation, by this sense of being an outsider, of struggling to find words. Like I'm a chronic over-explainer, and it comes from this struggle to be understood. Like I'm trying to make you understand what it is and what my perspective is, and I use a lot of words. And as you'll see during the course of this interview, I use a lot of words. And for me, that's always that's been this core of anxiety of not having enough words to explain what I want to explain, right? And I think that's where my journey started as a young person, as a child. And even though I was very consciously seeking out queer spaces as a teenager, as a 20-something, and I was engaging with a lot of queer narratives and talking about that, my own realization, and I knew all the vocabulary, right? And I knew people, right? But my own realization came in, like I said, in my 30s. Literally, I remember I started using the label bisexual for myself when in 2018 when the ruling came out, right? And since then, my use of labels in the space of sexuality, in the space of gender, in the space of orientation have evolved, right? So I no longer identify as bi. I use the term queer because it seems to describe my political and philosophical inclination as well. And I was reading queer theory like years before I started using the term for myself. But like, you know, from there you kind of evolved into, from bisexual, I went to asexuality as a label, and that was in 2020, right? Like during those pandemic months of lockdown and self-reflection, forced self-reflection, that's when asexuality, and I was aware of the term, I knew what it meant, I knew asexual people. The thing, so that came about then. My struggles with gender and my identity have been there since I was a child. This is like the first thing I remember, struggling with this stuff. But this acceptance of gender fluidity, of it being something that is applicable to me, happened like last year. And the same space with my neurodivergence, like. So neurodivergence is like an umbrella term, right? Like all the terms we use nowadays, right? And it encompasses a lot of things that are classified as disorders. So ADHD, disorders in the name. Depression, anxiety, all of these are considered disorders. They're considered something that is pathological, basically. Like, you know, like it's a disease that you have to cure. Right? As opposed to states of mind that affect your cognition and behavior. So again, I have lived with depression. I have lived with anxiety. I have lived with panic, with this just inability to process stuff that seems very basic to others, right? But it's only again, so it's only like, and something happened last year and this is actually a common story with adults who kind of take on the autism diagnosis, that they realize it after an extreme event, like something that requires intervention.
That's a very common narrative.
It drives them to kind of then seek answers. And again, here's the thing: I've been involved in education. I've worked with special needs kids. I have used these labels. I have trained teachers on how to work with autistic kids. Right?
So you have always been nearer to the field, like the understanding.
So I think maybe it was also because I was so close to it that I wasn't able to see it for myself. Can't see the trees, forest for the trees, or whatever that's saying. And I think what the pandemic did is it gave me distance from the work that I was doing. Right? It was not a choice, but whatever it is, it worked out for a certain benefit. And the idea that I can use these words not just to describe myself, but also use the experiences of other people using these words to describe and to relate.
What you accept, like acceptance is essentially a circular and a non-linear journey.
Yeah, very true, very true. Nothing goes straight and nothing goes only forward. There is backward, forward, round and round. You're right.
So Hina, you have lived in this intersection whether you knew it or not. You have lived in this intersection whether you had words for it or not for quite a long time. Are there any anecdotes from this intersection that you can share with us?
Work is a large part of people's lives, right? And it's been a large part of my life as well. And for the largest part, I was outside institutions. So I was either working in the freelance sector, or I was working on a project basis, or working in the creative sector where I wasn't employed by someone, right? And the two times that I was employed long term by someone, like a full-time employee of an institution, both times I had massive mental crashes, right? The first one I was in my early 20s, where it took me like a year, 2 years to recover from everything that I was dealing with. And the second one was just last year. And last year I was I think because I'm older, I was also in a better place to decide that this is not for me. It all became a thing about Hina's tone is too harsh. She is giving us feedback that is unacceptable in certain ways. Because one of the things that I was also giving feedback on is that there were queer stories being written, specifically WLW, women loving women stories, right? And I was like, this is not how it works, right? You can't have two women falling in love by simply replacing a man's role by the woman.
Yeah.
Right?
So and I was trying to something to do.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And I was trying to explain that. And when the way this organization decided to deal with this is to do a face-to-face call with the entire team, bringing up their complaints against me. Right? It was devastating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I couldn't give feedback for months after that. Right? And I know this for a fact that the entire team didn't want to do this. But because that is the culture, it was done.
Yeah.
Right? And I realized in that moment of having that call that either I come out and say, hello, I'm a queer person, hence I'm giving you feedback on queerness, or just take a back step and for some reason, and this is not usually, like, I have never felt the need to hide who I am, but in that moment, I could not say it. All I kept saying is that this is very close to my heart, this is very close to my heart. I could not say it.
So you couldn't divulge your queer identity to them?
See, the point is this is also the confusion with my queerness, right? My queerness is also not normative, right?
Okay.
So like when I say, if someone says I'm a lesbian or I'm gay, that's a vocabulary that people understand.
understand and know.
They have started, there is more awareness now of the transgender label, right? Intersex is still a confusion question mark. Queer, not too many people understand what that means. On top of that, if I go to explain I'm gender fluid, I'm asexual, right? What I felt is that this environment did not support that understanding at all. Right?
Yeah, I get
so
it.
so that same fear of not having the words, right? That is what kept me silent.
Yeah. So it was an underlying theme.
Yeah. So and that's like the latest thing that has happened, and I think that is what really spurred me into this, and this was of course very early in the year that I was working there, and such stuff continued through the year, and it was one of the key reasons, and it was articulated as a reason in my resignation, that this is the reason why I'm quitting, and I realized that if this keeps happening, that if I have to keep policing what I say because I don't feel safe, and that was the first time I understood it as not feeling safe. One day, because this whole ICU trip happened, so I was on a course of insulin for a while, and a lot of medication. So I remember that there was this one day I had to go and buy the medication, right? And I literally had to jot down the steps and follow them, which included things like get dressed, put on your mask, lock the door, get a rickshaw from this rickshaw stand, because my brain was unable to process this in the moment. It was so overloaded.
Yeah, so you broke it down to the small.
Yeah. And this continued. Like there was months of me being able to do one thing in one day, and that one thing could be as simple as getting up and going and making food. Getting the market also was another task that would happen on another day, right?
Yeah.
So my first few months of this year, I had to sit down and make so every day was dedicated to an activity. Like my Google Calendar had days marked, it still does, but on a different level. So literally days marked like aaj bazaar lana hai. Is it okay if I break into Hindi now?
Yeah, of course.
Right? Aaj bazaar lana hai. Aaj billion ka khana lana hai. And like basic shit, I had to write it down. There had to be alarms to remind me because my brain just wasn't able to process this. And I kept saying like, I just feel useless. I don't think I'm able to do anything. But I didn't say it in a sad way. I was like, okay, I'm useless. I do not know what to do. I will perhaps continue being useless. I cannot make money. I could not make money. So I wasn't working. Right? And I wasn't able to, like, I don't think getting a job was something that I was applying to jobs because in LinkedIn you just have to press. So there was a day dedicated to look at LinkedIn and apply for jobs. Right? So that was happening, but I was doing it half-heartedly and I wasn't even expecting a response.
Yeah, I get that.
Right? I was just doing it so that I could tell my parents that मैं कर रही हूँ. Right? But my friends, my found family, my children, my everyone, I made this clear to them that I'm going to be useless. Right? I'm very incapable of doing stuff. So, and that continued for a few months. And I allowed it to continue. Like I was like, this is fine. This is cool. I do not expect more than from myself. So, like I literally had to move from my really lovely house in a very central area of camp to this flat, which is owned by my family, but is very, very away from the city.
Okay.
And, like all of those things. And there were like weeks when I moved here where I couldn't sleep because I was just having breakdown after breakdown after breakdown, but I wasn't depressed. This was overwhelmed breakdown. And I think it's important to know the difference.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Crying because you're overwhelmed and crying because you're depressed or crying because you're sad is three different things.
Yeah.
Right? So that happened. And unfortunately, my mom had a massive fall. She broke her arm very badly. And because I was in this state, I was able to say, I will focus only on caretaking. So there is nothing else in life that I will do. For these 2-3 weeks, I will focus only on caretaking. And I was able to do that. Right? This is also when I had been interested in gaming for a while, like for a couple of years. And this was when I actually had the time to go and take up courses that I could study.
Okay.
And so and when my mom's thing happened, I was like, I can't do this today. I cannot do the course. So then that was only caretaking. And it was a kind enough organization that understood that.
That's beautiful.
Right. So they didn't penalize me for missing classes. They in fact gave me extra classes, gave me extra support. Right. And so I was able to do that course. I was able to kind of, learn new skills after a very long time, to be honest. Right. Because once you become good at something, you're just doing that again and again. And everyone's praising you for doing that again and again. Because, okay. But after a really long time to be able to say that, oh shit, I suck at something. And yay, I'm learning. That's
a very good point. Everything about you seems to have this great connection with storytelling and community building. Is there a personal reason, a personal story behind this, let's say, itch to inclusivity?
I think it's a universal reason. If you're on the outside, you either build a home outside or you keep struggling to come inside. Right? For me, it was creating spaces for inclusive spaces was essentially creating spaces where I could belong. Right? It's really that simple.
Home where everyone else was welcome.
It completely was. It completely was. And in the physical sense as well. So when I started living on my own in the place that I built as a home, that it was what it was. That you come here and this is home for you. This is safe. This is always going to be safe, right? And that is something that we kind of really leaned into that during the lockdown time when everything was shut, where these kids who I now have kind of adopted and are now my kids would just come home and we would make dinner and cook together, clean, scrape things together. There would be this process of sharing your happies and sads of the week.
Oh, right? What a beautiful domestic love.
Yeah, so this idea, I'm a big believer in the power of domesticity, and domesticity is all about the idea of building home.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, most of what I've done in most of my life has been because I needed a place to belong. Right. And because I wasn't finding that place, it was, you created that space. It wasn't I wasn't doing it with such a grand design. It was it came from a very, very, very personal need.
So in this article of yours, Cultural Futurism, Possibilities, Probabilities and Potential, you say you dive it to a point where you say the heart of cultural futurism is lies a potential to have a better future. Could you elaborate on this from an Indian lens?
So when we think of a better future, and especially when we look at the dominant futuristic narratives, whether it's sci-fi, Star Trek or whatever, a large part of it is very technologically driven, right? So you have advanced technology, you have advanced medicine, you have advanced weaponry and sabers and lightsabers and whatnot. But you kind of look at cultural and behavioral aspects, and most times those are not looked at with enough nuance. Also, to a large extent, I remember reading this article that said that we imagine the future as we live today.
Yeah.
Right? So people who have a good life, which is majority of your sci-fi writers, will imagine that good life to continue. Right? But a lot of futurism and a lot of utopian futurism comes from those who are oppressed today. Right?
Yeah.
And there is no way that we are imagining our lives exactly as how they are. We are imagining ourselves getting what we want right now.
Yeah.
Right? And now kind of look at that from an Indian lens. First of all, so we all know as a culture, India is not a monolithic culture.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot of things. But you kind of break it down to simple things like, what would clothing look like 100 years from now? What would Indian clothing look like? What role would gender presentation in clothing have when you have clothing 100 years from now? Right? You also it could be something as basic as your embroidery and your a tie and dye and all of those things, which are your handloom fabrics. But what does that look 100 years from now? Right? Because you never see this in a Star Trek or whatever. You see a very Western presentation of outfits, right? And so that's one thing. Or you think about, what do food habits look like? Right? What are the crops that are there that exist at that time that have evolved from India? Right? What are some of the religious institutions? Like one of the stories I'm writing has a madrasa institution 100 years from now, right? And the one of my opening scenes, for which I've drawn a little bit of a comic, is of non-binary students in the madrasa.
Okay, I'm very excited to read this comic.
so the idea is that how are these institutions evolving? How are you placing yourself within that? And it's and I think any cultural lens on futurism kind of gives you that context. I think it allows people to see themselves in that future.
Because you have worked, or like you have been employed, and you have struggled as a neurodivergent person. And correct me if I'm wrong. You also coach people in getting to professional victories, while also managing the stress that essentially comes along in working in neurotypical environments, right? So I have a twofold question here. One is, what would be your advice to the neurodivergent people who have no option but to operate in neurotypical work environments? And two is, what would be your advice to the managers who are handling neurodivergent teams?
I think one of the things that has worked really well for me is being explicit, right? Like I after my experience with work last year, my LinkedIn profile explicitly says queer neurodivergent, right? So the point is that, and my CV says it. If you haven't looked at my LinkedIn, my CV also says it. And my point is that when I'm sending the CV in, that's right at the top, right under my name. Okay, that's like the first two things you know about, 2-3 things you know about me, and owning it. So owning the fact that you are different, and speaking about that and your needs, right? Like just yesterday we were in a Twitter space, and I was saying that there is, especially in the Indian context, we look at jobs as blessings. We look at it we look at it as if someone's doing us a massive favor, and I think that's more people who are raised feminine as women, people who are non-normative kind of see it as someone's doing me a favor by giving me this job.
Yeah, just be constantly grateful.
Yeah, be grateful, exactly. And in that gratitude, you kind of put your needs secondary or tertiary or whatever at some level, right? So I think stop being grateful for jobs. They need us more than we need them, right? And these are like fundamental shifts in thinking in your perspective. So stop seeing jobs as necessary for you to be accepted, like just like एक ज़माने में and आज भी होता है, like you see marriage as a thing for छापा you as a human,
certified
right? Job,
decent human.
Yes. So job is another one of those things.
Yeah.
Right. And so that needs to stop. Okay. And then so once you understood that, also then realize work is not an emergency. Okay. There is nothing in this world that if you miss a deadline or if you don't stick to the time assigned to you will lead to the end of the world or will lead to massive chaos and catastrophe. Okay. There's
unless you're working in like emergency fields, like
but that's a separate thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. 90% of us do not work in those fields.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even when you are working at like the higher stress levels like investment banking and stuff, right? Yes, I actually don't know enough about investment banking to talk about this, but my point is there is a way that you can work with your team that does not put the stress on an individual for the completion of a task, right? And have that collaborative. So the point is, this is not just a company, but it has to be your personal mindset that nothing is the end of the world.
Okay.
All right. And the third thing, and again, this is very specific to the Indian space, is hierarchy. Fuck that shit. Okay. The fact that I owe you discipline and I owe you allegiance because you are a senior needs to be, oh my God, stop.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If we, while there is someone who is responsible and it helps to have that accountability, I do not owe anyone obeisance or respect or whatever it is. So this is not just about managers, it's about kindness as a cultural component of life. Right? You know, like we've always seen kindness as a virtue, and certain people have that virtue because they are good people, and certain people don't because they're not that great at peopling. But I think kindness is a practice, and you can practice kindness as a part of your work behavior, right? And as someone who reports to people who are managing me and manages younger people or people who are and manages people, I know that it's not that hard, right? I know that, like right now, this simple thing of what you did of just checking in with the time, saying, hey, do you need a break? Take a break, right? That's kindness. And it's not kindness, I mean, I'm sure you have a great heart, but it's not kindness that is reliant on your great heart. It's a behavior. Put it on a checklist, tick it off.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's a learnable skill.
It's a learnable skill. Very true. Yeah.
Favorite queer role model?
Walter Mercado.
Okay. Best thing about being queer?
Being fluid.
Best thing about being Hina?
Just being Hina.
Favorite queer character on screen?
That's my answer.
One thing that scares you the most?
Loneliness as a future thing in my life.
Okay. One thing that inspires you the most?
Stories.
I thought you were going to say Bakri.
Bakri is not, she is inspirational in the sense that she inspires me to take naps.
Great inspiration.
Yeah, but that's like one aspect of my life.
Okay. Now, your immediate reaction after I say these words.
Okay.
Workplace equity.
Haha.
Homophobia. Allyship.
Do you know how to spell it?
Ambition.
Overrated.
Politics.
History.
India.
Yay!
Hina, thank you so much for this conversation today. I'm very grateful for the stories and the anecdotes you have shared with us.